guys? It's John Nelson, and you are listening to the Starting Block Podcast. Guys, this is a show for complete athletic development. Our mission here is to give you the tools to win, whether you are the athlete, the parent, or the coach. As always, I'm here with my co-host, Chris Scarborough. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, it's a little bit chilly on this for an April Saturday morning, the Saturday before Easter, 2023.
Yeah.
So, a little bit unusually cool.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It is over here as well. So let's, if you're new to our show, I appreciate you joining us, and let me give you a breakdown of how we operate. We are a little different than your standard podcast. We have multiple shows within our show. So the first type of episode that you're going to hear from us is going to be the Q&A, which is what you got today. That's where you will submit your questions through. Chris, where can they send them?
It's going to be on info@startingblockpodcast.com. info@startingblockpodcast.com. And
Yep.
there, just remember, the title of our podcast is The Starting Block, but our website is startingblockpodcast.com.
Yep. And that is where you can submit the questions, and the website. Believe me, guys, I tried to get thestartingblockpodcast.com, but it was already taken. So, and it's an inactive website. So if any listeners here know how to help us with that, that'd be awesome, because I can't seem to figure out how to take that domain over. But anyways, the point is you can submit your questions to info@startingblockpodcast.com, like Chris said, and we will answer those questions here. Those can be anything related to training, performance, rehab, nutrition, you name it. The neuro stuff, we'll dig into all.
And
of
they can, by the way,
they
can also subscribe on any of our platforms through that same webpage. So directly,
yeah, absolutely, everything's
right there on the front page. I mean, if you want to do Apple, Spotify, YouTube, any of them, you can subscribe right there on that first page.
Yep. And so that's Q&A. The other type of episode that you're going to hear from us will be our guest interview, and that's what a normal podcast is going to sound like. You know, most podcasts you hear out there, it's going to be just a couple people sitting down talking, and that's what our guest interviews are. We're going to bring on, colleagues who share the same core values and missions that we do, and they're going to share their stories of how they win and how they operate with their clients, their patients. And like I said, we got a great guest list. We've had some amazing guests on, and we got a lot of really good ones coming up too. If you're interested in seeing who's coming up, we actually have that listed on the website as well, so you can see who we got coming up for probably the next 3 months or so. And then the final episode is going to be our Friday Fact or Saturday sermon, kind of depending on when I get to it. I don't do these every week. It's every couple weeks. It's more so about 10 to 20 minutes of me giving you a little bit of insight into the business side of stuff, maybe the motivational side of, athletics or fitness or strength or what have you. Like I said, I don't do those episodes every week because I don't really believe in just putting content out there just to put it out there. If I'm going to put something out there, I want to make sure it's got a good quality to it. And so I'm not just going to ramble and say something and just have it fill space. So that's why you see those episodes, periodically. I try to be consistent with it, but I just got to make sure I got something good to say. So that is the breakdown of our show. We went over how to subscribe. So I do ask that you please subscribe, leave a review. That's how we grow, guys. And then the final little bit of housekeeping here is just want to say shout out to Exercise Unlimited. So if you don't know, guys, Exercise Unlimited, they're the largest distributor of new and pre-owned fitness equipment in Memphis and the Mid-South. They're locally owned and operated for over 23 years. They have a 5,000 square foot showroom with all the major brands, and they've got a 25,000 square foot warehouse of high quality pre-owned fitness equipment. So they are the experts in the fitness industry. Give them a visit if you're local at 387 South Front Street, or you can visit them online at Exercise Unlimited. Tell them John and Chris sent you, or you can use the promo code StartingBlock2023 and get some discounts there. So appreciate Exercise Unlimited. All right, housekeeping stuff I believe is done. Let's move on to the show. The show is Q&A today. And our question came from one of Chris's clients down in Birmingham, and a parent was asking why there's so. Well, let me rephrase this because it might make you look, Chris, bad. It might make you look bad. And that's not what happened. The parent was asking why their son tore their ACL, and That's a great question, because it kind of digs into the why and the what and the how and all that stuff.
Right.
So,
It was really more along the lines of, what does it mean to treat the why? Now, this is a frequent listener, and the question was more along the lines of, what does it mean to treat the why versus treating the what? They know what they tore, they know what they injured, but what does it mean to treat it? So, going back to, say, the Dr. J episode, or the Dr. Rob episode, or the Carolyn McMakin episode, or the Jay Schroeder episode, what does it mean to treat or train the why, as opposed to just training or treating the what?
Yeah, sure. So I'll get into that, and we can kind of go back and forth on that. So, you got to look at it through the lens of muscles really having two distinct properties. All right. Now we know, the ACL is not a muscle. So, but understand that muscles have two distinct properties, and how they operate and function is going to ultimately influence what's going on with things like, joints or ligaments or bursa or discs or what have you. Okay. So muscles, they're designed to strengthen. And this is kind of what we know, right? This is kind of what you think of when you think of, rehab or the gym, or, the physical property of the muscle. I include kind of tissue quality, like, pliability or flexibility, whatever, all those different things are kind of in that strength category in my mind. And don't get me wrong, that's important. Like, we got to have strength, right? I mean, like, your core's got to be strong. If you're rehabbing from an ACL, obviously, your quad and all that's got to be strong. But it's really only half of the equation. The other side of that is muscles have to absorb force. That's their second role. And a muscle absorbing force is what ultimately helps protect our body. So the way this happens is, force is a constant. It's always gravity. All right, gravity's always pushing down on us. But then you can add additional force to the body, like, jumping or lifting a weight, or like tripping over the curb and, like, having to catch yourself. Like, that's extra force that's entering the system. So what happens is, our brain sends the signal down to whatever muscle or muscles it needs to turn on at that time to absorb that force. And this loop is always going, like, it's going really, really fast, and it just doesn't stop. But the problem is that if that loop gets, shut off or cut off, and that signal can't get there, then that muscle is not going to be able to respond as quickly as it should, or it may not even respond at all. And when that happens, the force that enters is going to travel somewhere else. It's going to go to another part of the body. Well, that part of the body, it's already got its own job. And so if it's taking the brunt of another muscle that's not working, then it's going to start to get inflamed. It's going to become painful. And if the problem persists, it's going to eventually stretch, fray, tear, rupture, etc. And the key with this whole thing is, like, you can't separate, you cannot strengthen a muscle and influence how it absorbs force. It doesn't work that way. Like, if it did, then strength would fix everything, but that's not how it works. The muscle's ability to absorb force is controlled by the signal the brain sends to the muscle. So think of it like a light bulb. Like, if you have a 40-watt bulb in your lamp, and you change that out to a 60-watt bulb, that'd be the same thing as strengthening the muscle. But if the light switch never sends a signal to the light bulb, it's never going to work. And that's the same process here. And so when we look at something like an ACL, obviously the medical diagnosis and everything is extremely important. Of course, like, you got to go through that. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is, it's usually the thought of the, practitioner or therapist or whomever, that the problem resides within the ACL. But when you look at it through the lens of muscles absorbing force, you can see that the ACL is the byproduct of a muscle not absorbing force. The force wasn't absorbed, so it travels into that ACL, and that's what creates the ultimate problem. Now, doctor has to come in, do surgery. You got to go through the rehab process, of course. But our end, we can help get the muscles firing again, not via strength, via neurological stimulation, get the muscles firing to absorb force and take the force out of that area so it can heal more efficiently.
Right.
And that's kind of how we attack things, how we do it at ELP. Like I said, I'm a lot of the training under, Dr. J. We do, me, Dr. J, Dr. Rob. That's how we approach
Well,
things.
the interesting thing is that, as you said, and as Dr. J said in his previous interview, it's not like taking a step on just walking down the sidewalk or walking in your house or whatever shouldn't hurt. I mean, your body clearly has the strength to be able to walk, and it should have the ability to absorb the forces from that just walking around in your house or walking on the sidewalk. But clearly, a lot of people hurt when they take steps or they do whatever. Well, it's so clearly something is not absorbing force. There's a threat there. So once again, it goes back to what you were saying about timing. It's that timing. There's something is not turning on at the right time to absorb force, which is making that force go into a joint or into, and it could, we're using the ACL in this example, but we could pick any joint in the body. It could be, your ankle hurts or your foot hurts or your knee hurts or your hip hurts or whatever. It just so happens in this particular individual, it was a ACL tear. Well, and that was a significant amount of force that went into that, but
right. And I want to interject real quick and step in because, I think there becomes some confusion in like, okay, well then if a muscle is always, absorbing force and the timing is correct, then there shouldn't be any injuries. It's like, okay, I see your theory, but here's the deal. If I'm a running back and a 300-pound offensive lineman comes barreling, into my knee, I don't really care how many muscles are turned on and how efficiently they're absorbing force. Your knee is going to give. Like it's just, it just is what it is. So, there's still injuries are still going to happen, but we're talking about these, like these non-contact type of things, the day-to-day things, like you were saying.
And another thing too that we'll frequently see, and once again, we've had numerous of our guests that have mentioned this, and it's think of the person who's not turning the muscles on at the right time. Okay, we're not talking about the strength, but they'll seem to have one little injury after another. So they tear one ACL. Well, 6 months, 9 months, whatever, a year later, they tear the other one, or they re-injure the first one. Then they have a hip injury or hip pain or whatever. Those things are I know for my curiosity, those are things I'm very interested in being able to prevent that next one. And so it's being able to, I think that's where neuro-targeting and this neural method of training, I think that's where we're going to have the biggest impact. I think that's where it can have the biggest impact, is being able to prevent that person from having that second injury that next time around, or being able to recover from that first one. And I tell you, John, I don't know about you, but Dr. Rob interview to me was eye-opening. I mean, the very fact that an unresolved concussion could have an impact on your healing of a current injury, or it could create a second injury, a secondary injury somewhere down the road. That non-contact injury can make you more susceptible to that non-contact injury. I mean, that to me, that fascinates me, that can actually create that issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't remember if I said that or if I shared this in his interview or not. I usually have guests on. I try not to get in the way too much, because I know people get tired of hearing me and they want to listen to them. So I'm not sure if I shared this story or not, but yeah, I mean, I remember probably 8, 9, 10 years ago, something like that. Right when we first started, it was I think I did share a story. It was the athlete that I actually brought down to you, and that's how you and I met a long time ago. But what ended up happening was, like, this young man at the time had started just accumulating all these just random injuries that it didn't make sense. And, nobody could really figure it out. And, basically the short story was he had sustained a few hits to the head prior, months, year. I don't even remember. It's been so long since I've seen the guy. But ultimately, it was just that, subtle little neurodegeneration that ultimately impacted what the body was able to do. Like, and that's where, in the concussion thing, I think it becomes important to understand, like, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical, so I'm not giving you medical advice on how to treat a concussion by any means. Like, follow what your doctor tells you. When you look, though, at how the nervous system interacts with the muscular system, what you see is that muscles are really not important on the hierarchy of needs. Our body doesn't really care about the muscle. It needs them to support our body and move and all that stuff. But in the hierarchy, they're not important. So if our brain is working to try to repair something, it will more than likely be at the expense of the muscle. And like, it doesn't mean that you're not ever going to be able to move it. It's one of those things you don't even realize is happening because your body is efficient. It's going to work around the problem. But I always tell people, like, it's evaluating, okay, if I'm watching your eye, okay, and we're doing like pursuits, all right, it's, okay, do you follow, back and forth the right way? Okay, yes or no. But what you got to think of is like, okay, if you get hit in the head, it's no longer does the eye move back and forth the right way. Has the pattern of that changed? Like, is the signaling process different? And that's just an example that I that's how my brain thinks about it. And I think when we get into the concussion type of stuff and how it influences the body, that's kind of the approach of looking at it. Does that make any sense?
And so that kind of answers my next question. So in a lot of ways, the way a concussion could impact, say, this ACL or create a susceptibility to tearing the next ACL, it could very well be that it changes this person's muscular recruitment pattern. It could be it affects their visual system and the way that they perceive their environment, in which case they maybe so they say they don't have the right reaction to what they see. I'm really interested in getting into how does the vestibular impact this. So I turn my head and all of a sudden I don't perceive information coming in around me, and that impacts the way I turn muscles on. So once again, I mean, we still come into this particular issue of, okay, I perceive my environment. I don't turn muscles on at the right time, at the right amount of time, at the right level of force, and fill in the blank. And now all of a sudden, now I have another injury, or I have I tear my other ACL, or I re-injure the same ACL, or I don't heal from that surgery as fast as I should, or my quad doesn't turn on. All of a sudden I can't get my mass back, my strength back that I should have gotten back from that injury in the first place. There's a lot of other there's a lot of reasons why the brain or injuries to the brain, or we're not saying that these are necessarily clinical concussions, or they may not even be a concussion. It could just be some other eye tracking pattern issue, but yet it impacts this particular person's joint health.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I put up on my page, my personal page, and my business ELP's YouTube page, a short little video of a young lady who had sustained a minor concussion, and just something as minor as that. I mean, it altered her movement pattern quickly. Within a couple weeks, like, you could see a change in how she was, in her slow-mo video, what was going on. But, kind of back to the ACL thing, I mean, I've worked with plenty of ACL recoveries, and, if you're a PT or a doctor listening to this, we're not stepping on your toes at all. Like, this is all about working together to help, because, the parameters that are set for the healing process are important to follow. The strengthening, parameters and rehab parameters, that's all very important. What the doctor says, is very important. Where we come in, though, is, again, understanding that it tore and muscles are not absorbing force, and that's why it tore. Now, surgery can also alter that as well, okay, because you're influencing things. And so by getting with somebody like quickly into their recovery, abiding by parameters, the doctor sets forth, and getting these muscles to respond again, getting them to absorb force, helps assist that healing process because the force is no longer going into that area. And I mean, we've shaved a lot of time off ACL recoveries. I mean, there's been a lot of people that have, gone through their protocols with their PTs and doctors and, I mean, gone very quickly through it. And, that's part of the reason why. I mean, because you're addressing the origin of the issue, not just the symptom. Right. Or the end result. We're addressing the origin.
By the way, shout out to Zach and Evan with Accelerate ACL. I mean think about being able to work with the PT, pre-ACL, before this person even has surgery, and given enough time, they can actually have this patient. If they have say 3 weeks, he said it's not unusual for them to have the person who has not had surgery yet to be running.
Yeah, that was
very cool. And you think about it, and he's not saying, hey, you don't have to have your ACL repaired. He's not saying that. What he's saying is that body is now prepared. Yeah. That's a great a great time now. Okay, now your body's ready to have surgery and recover.
Yeah, I mean, you've made the process like you've helped the surgeon
and
out.
The PT. Yes, and
like
the PT.
Now it's
yes,
exactly. By addressing some more, of the origin and excuse me, addressing some more of the origin there, and like it makes their job even easier. Like, and it helps that healing process. And I think that's where trying to help get this message out is how we can improve this segment of the industry, because I think it years ago there was a time where all this was fresh and new, and I think there were a lot of providers that obviously naturally skeptical of stuff, of course, but like I think there were just some people out there that took it as like, oh hey, this is replacing it, and like no, that's not what it's for, guys. This is to help bolster and boost the healing process. I got another interesting one about the concussion. This just popped into my head. This was I haven't seen this client in a while. He moved away. But this was a guy that I had worked with, for a while, a couple of years. I mean, he'd been a client, kind of would come in if, needed a little tune up or something, or, whatever. So like I had a history with this guy, knew him well, and, came in one day and we were working through some stuff, and he had this arm issue, and like, it would not go away. And like I said, I mean, I had experience with this guy. We weren't making any progress with anything. He was like, man, you get this looked at, go to a doctor. Like, we need to figure out what's going on. Nothing. Nobody had any answer really. And all of a sudden, just one day it showed up and was like, you had a concussion that we didn't talk about at some point, didn't you? Yeah. Bingo. Address that neural issue. And I mean, bam, gone. Arm problem immediately dissipated. It didn't return. And it's bizarre. And he's like, yeah, man, I had that concussion like 20 years ago, like in college, I was like, wow. And just the fact that it lingered that long and just happened to show up.
It's kind of, I find it interesting, to see some of the neuro-targeting techniques and some of the techniques I learned from primal reflex release technique. And he had a chiro, and I cannot remember the gentleman's name. I mean, fantastic stuff, very gentle techniques that basically, if you want to get right down to it, it's very gently lengthening out the sutures in the skull. It's a very mild process. Even with the most pain, sensitive people in the world, it's a very gentle process. And, it's amazing. I mean, it almost puts people to sleep, how relaxing it is. And yet, I would imagine that if for some that have concussions, it's probably just kind of and let's face it, how many people have been hit in the head, have this mild underlying, head trauma, and it.
I mean, you don't even need to be hit in the head. Like I tell people all the time, it could be just you bumped your head getting out of the car. Like it does not take much at all. Dr. Tennant talks about that, a lot too.
And so you get the spasm of some of these areas, not the sutures themselves, but the tissues around the sutures, and then this little gentle technique just kind of relaxes them. And I'd be willing to bet that part of the relaxation is just that sympathetic tone relaxing a bit and that parasympathetic kind of taking hold, and that person's wanting to go to sleep, using just a gentle technique that the person barely feels.
Yeah. And you brought the PRRT. I'll kind of go on a tangent there. I shout out to you and Dan Fichter for turning me on to that years ago, 10 years ago. I love that stuff. I still use it. And I find it works extremely well. Like, going through, neuro-target session with somebody, getting them in balance, getting things firing. And then if there is still kind of this physical manifestation that's present, maybe a muscle still is, tight, and just putting in balance doesn't release that yet, or what have you. Then I use that all the time, right after, because now you've gone through the neuro-target, you've eliminated, any type of neural interference, you've cleared all that out, you've put the body back, in a very good state that it needs to be in, muscles are doing the job, and then a little technique like that's super non-invasive. Just boom, it can just loosen something up instantly.
Absolutely.
I do that all the time. I love that technique, but like your hip, you came up, a week or two ago, and you asked, hey,
Yes.
can I work on it because your hip was bugging you? And that's the same. It's the same thing we're talking about, guys. So like, what was going on with his hip? I don't know. I'm not the doctor. Chris has the medical background, so it's like, but same thing. Just I checked, things were shut down, got them turned back on, boom, instantly within 15 minutes.
Right.
Gone.
Right. And so it's not, it doesn't matter if there's tissue damage, hardware damage, if you want to call it. Okay. It doesn't matter if there's tissue damage or not. I didn't hurt. That's what I cared about. Okay. I can now walk. I can now move freely without hurting. That's what I cared about. That's what the patients care about in most cases. That said, you get the signals. So neuro-targeting and that getting the brain working to the muscle first. That's sort of step one in this whole process, I guess. It is.
Oh, it's not sort of. It is.
It's like,
Yes,
it doesn't matter if there's
one.
tissue damage or not. You just for that tissue damage to recover, to heal, it's got to have the right signal.
Gotta have it.
Signal. That's sort of where we're dealing with now. Then you can deal with the tissue, and it will start to heal much faster. And you can do that by ARP or newbie or other manual techniques, strength training at the appropriate level for that appropriate period of time for that injury. And now you're going to get a much better response. So, John, just like you said a minute ago, this is not trying to step on the toes of the surgeon or the PT. It's the opposite. It's actually going to make their job easier. They're actually going to get a much better result.
Yes.
Because this person's gonna be working. their brain's gonna be working for them instead of against them. So that's, I think, that's the why. That's going back to your original question. That's treating the why. The what is actually the easy part once the why is taken care of.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. I hope that made sense to people, and just addressing the origin of the situation will make massive change in the recovery process. And that's just the recovery. We hadn't even talked about the performance side. We'll do that that's a whole other episode. Because again, like you can strengthen a muscle all day, but if it is inhibited, if there's a delay there, if that timing's off, it doesn't matter what you do. It's
and by the way,
stuck,
just to fill in the blank, we just happen to use ACL in this particular example. You can fill in the blank to any musculoskeletal injury or pain.
Oh yeah,
it could shoulder, elbow, finger. Granted, the smaller the joint, the more susceptible.
Yeah,
but
I've got an Osgood-Slaughter kid right now who came to see
us.
And
I met him. I met him
years,
a couple weeks ago.
Years. Yes, you met him. Yeah, years. And they came to us, and within like 2 sessions.
Yeah.
Pain gone. And it's been over a month now, and we're still working on here and keeping things in balance. And there's I think there's been like one or 2 days where it ached a little bit, but when you go from an 8 out of 10 on both knees all the time to 0, or maybe a 1 at some points just by turning muscles on. That's the impact of influencing the nervous system. Then you can, work on the physical side of stuff later. So that was a good question. I hope, whoever asked that, I hope that makes sense. If you got a follow-up question on it, shoot us an email, please, or ask Chris next time you see him. I'll be more than happy to get back on here and talk about it a little bit more. And, Dr. J, my mentor, will be coming back on soon, too. So, happy to answer any questions as it comes, regarding NeuroTarget or anything like that. So good question, man. I think we covered it. So guys, share the show, please. Leave us a review, subscribe if you like this. If you got any if this is valuable to you at all, please leave us a review, subscribe. That's a small fee to ask for the information that we give you. I hope if you got any value out of it all, we would greatly appreciate it. So share the show, guys. We appreciate you listening. And,
Thank you,
talk
guys.
to you again soon. See you.